KOCT program underwriters are not affiliated with the City of Oceanside. This program is underwritten in part by Waste Management of North County in Oceanside. We are dedicated to serving customers and community as a safe, comprehensive service provider, a good corporate citizen, and a responsible environmental steward. Think green. Think Waste Management. You are watching KOCT's North County Roundtable. On today's show, we have state assembly candidates for the 76th District.
Welcome to KOCT's North County Roundtable. I'm your host, Kent Davy. On this special June primary edition of North County Roundtable, we'll be speaking with some of the candidates for the California 76th District Assembly. All the candidates were invited to attend this program, but not all are participating. Tonight's format will begin with brief 30-second self-introductions followed by questions and answers. We've asked our candidates to keep their responses to 1 minute so we can get in as many questions as possible. We'll take a brief break at the half-hour or approximately half-hour mark, followed by more questions and brief closing statements. The candidates have been seated in alphabetical order, so with the format explained to them, let's get started. We'll begin with Teresa Boerner Horvath.
Hello, thank you, Ken. My name is Tasha Boerner Horvath. I'm a city council member, a former PTA leader. I got my start in politics trying to get in a stop sign near my son's school, a businesswoman and a mother. And I have the right combinations of qualities of experience, temperament, and track record to get good things done for our district, to keep California leading, and to make sure that we have somebody in the state assembly who represents the values of Encinitas, Carlsbad, Oceanside, Vista, and Camp Pendleton, which are sustainability, opportunity, prosperity, and equality.
Thank you. Thomas.
Thanks, Kent. I'm Thomas Krouse. I'm a native Californian with an MBA from USC and a degree in economics from Stanford University. I moved to North County 20 years ago when my job relocated to Carlsbad. I'm the only person who challenged the incumbent in either of the last two elections because I'm the only candidate fighting against, not just talking about, business as usual in Sacramento, including higher taxes, wasteful spending, and twisted priorities. I've been endorsed by State Senator Jeff Stone, by Pam Slater-Price, Jim Wood, the Libertarian Party of San Diego County, and the Veterans Party of America.
Amanda.
Thank you. I'm Amanda Rigby. I'm a two-term city councilwoman in the city of Vista, representing my city at Sandag as well as the Encina Wastewater Authority in Carlsbad. I'm also the president of the San Diego County Division of the League of California Cities, where we represent the community voices of our city enforcing and clawing back for local control from Sacramento. I make several trips to Sacramento every year for that purpose. And as a two-term councilwoman, I am uniquely qualified. Thank you.
Jerome.
Well, thank you, Kent. My name is Jerome Stocks. I was a three-term Encinitas City Council member and served 3 years as mayor. I also served on the San Diego Association of Government Board, as well as 2 years as the board chairman. I served on the North County Transit District, including 2 years as chairman of that. And that was when we built the Sprinter, which is taking traffic off of the 78 right now, and allowing thousands of people to go back and forth.
Thank you, Jerome. Elizabeth.
I'm Elizabeth Warren, California's Elizabeth Warren, and I'm running because California families deserve a little bit better than they've been getting. We have a beautiful place here, but not everyone has a chance to take advantage of it. We are working way too hard and getting way too little for it. I believe that we can do better. I believe that we can do it together, and I'm optimistic that we can make it happen. Thank you so much. Elizabeth Warren, I appreciate your vote.
And Brian.
Thank you, Ken. I'm Brian Wimmer. I reside in Oceanside. I work in information management for the defense industry. I have a lovely wife of 15 years who works for the U.S. Marine Corps in Camp Pendleton. I myself am a veteran, a successful business owner, and a community service volunteer. I have been, duly, engaged in basically all the issues that I see an opportunity to kind of improve upon. I believe in a transparent government where accountability should be priority.
Very good. Tasha, we'll start with you. And there were noticeably absent any partisan flags as in the introductions. The Assembly currently has 54 Democrats to 80 seats. Is the Democratic supermajority in the Assembly, is it healthy? And could a GOP member be effective?
That's a great question, Ken. I've been endorsed by a number of state leaders as well as Congressman Scott Peters, local mayor of Encinitas, Catherine Blakespear, Corey Schumacher. And what I think we have is we have an ability to really fight for working families in Sacramento. And I think I will bring a reasonable, balanced approach. I have 15 years in business, and so I look at everything, and I'm very frugal with how we spend our taxpayer dollars, and I'll be a watchdog for that. But I do think with that supermajority, we can keep California leading against a very anti-science, anti-environment, anti-woman, anti-immigrant agenda that's coming from the national level. And so I think with winning the 76th Assembly District and turning it blue, we have a unique opportunity to elect somebody who really represents the values of our district.
Thomas.
One of the reasons why I was endorsed by Senator Jeff Stone is because I have a plan when I get into the legislature on day one to actually accomplish things with like-minded Democrats on certain issues to improve the quality of life in California. So for instance, Dr. Shirley Weber is a Democratic Assemblywoman down in the 79th District, and she supports school choice, and she regularly fights her own party. Clearly, you have to have choice in our system in order to have accountability, and there is nothing more important than the education of our children. So that's an example where I think Democrats can be very relevant, even in the position of being a super minority. In general, though, no, a supermajority is not healthy because it creates a situation when most of the critical decisions are being made out of the public view. And in order to hold our legislators accountable, everything needs to be discussed in a public view. We need to have a robust debate with multiple perspectives in order to achieve the best outcomes. And we simply don't have the time for the continued wasteful dysfunction in Sacramento.
Amanda?
Thank you. I agree that the supermajority in Sacramento right now is not healthy for the people because not everybody's voices are being heard. Not everybody has a seat at the table. There are a lot of things that are happening that are not put in the public eye, as you heard. I do have hope, though, because as somebody who has served for 6 years with the League of Cities on the Tax and Revenue Committee, I go up to Sacramento a lot, and frequently in that committee, I'm the only one talking about reducing taxes and clawing back regulation. But this last meeting that we were at, there have been people in that meeting there as long as I've been there, and they are coming to our side to understand the damage that the high taxes, the overregulation, the overreaching is doing to their communities as well. So I do not believe that the Republicans are irrelevant, even with the supermajority, because we are now getting to a point where everybody in California understands what's happening, and everybody, I think, is willing to listen a little bit more. And I will be that person in Sacramento.
Thank you. Jerome.
Thank you, Kent. Yeah, I do not believe that it's healthy for our state to have a one-party state. That's just not a good idea. I'm not exactly sure how to fix that right now today, but we need to work on that. I, however, have in fact worked with Democrat Senator Chris Kehoe and actually rewrote a bill that she previously introduced. And because of that successful rewriting of that bill, it was SB 268, I believe, our freeways are being improved and widened, and our railroad tracks are being double-tracked in our district. I also worked with Democrats to put sand on our beaches. Very important. Not just aesthetically, but for business. Tourism is the #2 economic driver in any area. And so we have to have a great place for our families to go to the beach. They don't want to sit on rocks.
Very good. Elizabeth?
I come from a background of national consumer advocacy, and I spent 3 years of my life working with public policy makers in Washington, D.C. and all across the country and in Sacramento to solve a problem. We brought together policymakers, change makers from all parts of the political spectrum, from far left Democrats to Tea Party Republicans and everyone in between. I believe that we achieve the best results when we bring people together and we find the common ground. That is my greatest strength, I believe, as an organizer, and I would bring that same skill to the State House because that's really what we need. We need to stop partisanship altogether and we need to come together and solve problems together. I will make that happen. Thank you.
Right.
Thank you, Ken. Well, as having formerly been working with the U.S. Army and Department of Defense over the last 15 years, it takes a team to get things done. And I've been encountered with many problems, many tasks to solve. And I believe that there is an opportunity here to collaborate, to have some balance in the state legislature. I do not believe that a supermajority is a good thing. Working on the DOD side of the House and working with the military, you just can't get anything done if it's just one-sided. You have to bring all the factors to the table and really understand what is going on. And I think there's a lot of good cases that we can make together and really solve a lot of the issues, whether it's affordable housing, whether it's environmental, or it's business climate. So I think that's one thing that I will definitely bring to the table is relationship-oriented business management style.
Tasha, the state of California has declared itself a sanctuary state. The president in the last 2 days has talked about putting National Guard on the U.S.-Mexican border. What steps should our state take to help reform immigration or to help solve these policies and problems?
Well, I think our communities are safest when law enforcement and our communities can work together. And when federal agencies come in and they deputize our local police force, which is paid for by our local taxpayer dollars, our communities aren't safer. We need to make sure that we keep the fabric of our communities together and find a path for citizenship. On the Encinitas City Council, we had a unanimous vote that supported the Clean Dream Act, and supporting dreamers and supporting our families is the way to really serve people in our district and make sure we keep our economy and our communities strong.
Thomas.
Well, clearly, the Proposition 54 is specifically designed only to shield criminals. They should be transferred directly to the federal authorities if they are illegal aliens to be deported. So by definition, what happens is now those people are released back into their communities, and it creates actually a hazardous situation for other community members who weren't otherwise involved in any of what the person was arrested and convicted for. So it's actually more dangerous for the rest of the community, and it's really an example of just a dysfunctional California government. Now, what can the state do to reduce these problems? We honestly need to think about our priorities. Are our own children and our own seniors and veterans more important than spending money on people who are not legally resident here in California? I say the answer is clearly yes. So we need to stop whatever programs that the state is funding that attract people to come here illegally so they can go through the legal migration system. But overall, the biggest solutions have to be dealt with at a federal level, and we need to work on things locally.
Thank you. Amanda.
Thank you very much. SB 54, the sanctuary state law, came out, and we've been talking about it for about a year, and I came out in opposition of SB 54 in March of last year with the Mayors for Safe Cities and Mayor Bill Wells in El Cajon and several others from around the San Diego County region. And I believe that when you have opposing laws, the federal law versus the state law, that's not good for the people and that's not good for the public safety. And the federal law needs to be implemented. And what can we do? We need to work with the federal government, and the federal government needs to work with the state government. But what SB 54 does is it allows criminal aliens to be released back into the street instead of being handed over to the federal government for deportation. Because we don't want criminal aliens on the street who are going to be released from prison and then continue to create havoc and harm our community. It's not safe. Thank you.
Jerome.
I want to completely agree. This is not healthy and it's not safe. We have a supremacy clause. The federal government is over the state, which is over the locals. What we have going on with California right now, though, is a very strange thing. Our state government has said we're not going to deal with the feds on matters that are federal crimes. And what's happening that I find very interesting, Escondido yesterday showed a great example. And there's a couple of counties. I believe the county of San Diego will be doing this. I believe it's Orange County did this as well, and some other little cities. And Escondido just passed it. They said, you know what? We're bypassing the state law, and we are going against what the state adopted, and we are enjoining the federal opposition to it. And so, okay, that's us. That's grassroots. Let's do it.
Elizabeth.
Boy, that's quite a lot to think about. I'm kind of curious as to why a lot of my GOP colleagues here are opposing states' rights, which is what this sounds like to me. I believe that the state of California actually has a right to determine for ourselves what we're going to do about our immigration issue. I also would take exception to Mr. Krouse's comment about providing programs that attract immigrants. As far as I know, the only programs that attract immigrants to this state are jobs. And for those who are undocumented and possibly working with false papers, they're actually paying into things like Medicare and Social Security that they won't ever be collecting from. So they're contributing to this state and to the federal tax base. They're not taking from it. I personally believe that we need to work with law enforcement. We need to make sure that the laws are upheld and that we are responsible and that we are keeping real criminals, out of the system. But what we need to do is take a look at what determines being a criminal. Just arriving here, it does not make you a criminal. Having a traffic ticket does not make you a criminal worth deporting. Thank you very much.
Brian.
Thank you, Ken. Well, public health and safety with regards to criminal activity from immigrants or anybody really is a partnership between federal law enforcement and local law enforcement. Not having federal law enforcement involved in networking, the ability of knowing who's coming across a border, what they're doing here, and how to connect with them is a huge vulnerability, and it's a national security issue. So in my thoughts with regards to the sanctuary state, it's really a no-go, and quite frankly, federal law preempts state law when it comes to that. Thank you.
Amanda, in building a vibrant California economy, would you emphasize reforming tax policies, addressing income inequality, or would you do something else?
Thank you, Kent. California is a state of innovation. We're the 6th largest economy in the world, and keeping our economy and having good jobs is a top priority for me. But we need an economy that works for everyone. And I think one of the things that we have is the lag between when people get trained and what kind of jobs we have in the workforce, especially in our region. So one of the things that I would focus on is bringing together business organizations, educational institutions, government, and labor so that we can talk about how do we train the workforce not only of today, but tomorrow, and to make sure that we're growing the economy as a whole. And I think that is a very collaborative way where we could grow the pie and that everybody benefits and we're prosperous and we provide opportunities, and it still can be sustainable when we're looking at industries like clean tech.
The question was about taxes, though, correct?
Mm-hmm. It's about the economy and what you would emphasize.
California has some of the highest taxes in the country, and it actually squelches innovation. If you want to start a new company, you're going to look at places like Texas and other states where the HR regulations are much easier to navigate, where the taxes are lower, and where the cost of living is much lower for your prospective workers to live. So clearly we need to work on many dimensions in order to make California's economy much healthier. Just the fact that we're big doesn't make this a great place to live. In fact, we've sunk to the bottom of 50 out of 50 states for quality of life. China is big, right? India is big, right? That doesn't make the quality of life there any better than here. It's GDP per capita is what matters. And at some point, I would like to be able to respond to Elizabeth's comments about sanctuary states, but I will take that on another question. But the point being is that, yes, we need to look at our tax policies, we need to repeal the gas tax, and we need to return all the money from the cap and trade system to the people.
Thank you. Amanda.
Thank you very much. Last year, I was at one of the meetings I was at in Sacramento. One of our legislators came in to speak to us, and he was lamenting about how many businesses and residents have left the state of California, calling it a mass exodus. Now, when we look at the reasons why people are leaving California, it's the high taxes. We pay a high personal income tax, we have high corporate taxes, we are taxed on almost everything, including the gas tax that just went up and will go up again. So that is one of the things that we have to look back, and we need to go to Sacramento and look at what these taxes are doing. What are the programs they're going for? Has the lockbox been broken? We hear a lot about lockboxes, but it seems to me that everybody in Sacramento has a key to the lockbox. So we need to claw back the taxes, we need to claw back the regulations, And only when we have a serious conversation about why the cost of living is so high here will we be able to bring back some of the businesses, those jobs, and the people. Thank you.
Jerome.
Thank you, Ken. You know, I think you're going to hear a lot of similar answers to this particular question. We do have the highest income taxes in the nation as California. We have the highest gas taxes in the nation as California. I'm not sure what we're getting for our money, but that's just the reality. Also, our income tax situation is what they call a hockey stick. It's virtually nothing and then it spikes. The problem with that is really, really rich people sometimes have a bad year. And when they do, our state economy tanks. And that's called recession. And that's not good for anybody. We really do need a more moderated form of taxation, if at all. We really do need to moderate that just for future protection against the spike failing, you know?
Elizabeth.
I believe that we need to do everything we can to strengthen our communities and our state. And I think, you know, Mr. Krouse may find it interesting, but I actually agree with him on the gas tax. I believe that it disproportionately affects people who have no choice but to commute. We can find the money to fix potholes and things other places. So I actually am in agreement with that. I'm also in agreement with Amanda on the issues of, hey, making it easier for businesses to be here. I am very supportive of incentives for small businesses. We've got to shore them up in our communities. It will strengthen our local tax bases. One thing we can do is make sure that we pay our workers a living wage. That stimulates the local economy. People need to have more disposable income, so we need to make sure that we have our housing that is affordable, which means building more homes so that we can bring the costs down. There's so many things that we can do. It's a wonderful formula that we can put together. We have the opportunity to make this a great state and to strengthen our economy, and I'm excited about doing that.
Right.
Thank you, Ken. Well, looking at the business climate, from my perspective, having had employees in this state, it's quite frankly very discouraging to see that we are the 6th, 7th largest economy in the world, yet we're having a lot of businesses that can't afford to actually make ends meet here. And so they are looking at other states like Texas, Arizona, or even Washington or Oregon. And that's sad. I mean, the last thing that we need to have is any kind of excess or vacuum with regards to our businesses feeling comfortable to live here. Now, the other thing too is low-income wage earners, middle-income families are also struggling to make ends meet. Not only are the rents increasing in many areas, but there's a lot of unaffordable housing right now in our market, and it's a supply and demand issue. So I think we have to really look at a lot of aspects of how we can, as communities, as a legislature, to come up with solutions that can improve that for all the wage income earners along with businesses.
Amanda, a related question. California housing is some of the most expensive in the nation. This county, according to Sandag estimates, is going to be short 150,000 units by 2050. What should the state do to help solve this?
I think there's a lot the state can do. You know, as a former planning commissioner, I always say all roads lead to housing, because you're having housing that's affordable stimulates the economy. It helps get the talent that we need to drive innovation in our businesses. And one of our problems is a supply problem, but we're not going to be able to build ourselves out of this problem. If we really want to have affordable housing and high land value areas, we need to be looking at how do we incentivize naturally affordable housing, which is affordable by design. It means smaller housing. It means granny flats. We need to be looking and incentivizing cities that are accommodating homeless shelters and making sure we're taking care of our most vulnerable. And from the state perspective, I think we could do that. Also from the state perspective, I think we need to make sure we're not taking away local control. I think one of the things that makes housing work is when it's compatible with its communities, and I think our cities are really the best judge for that. But they have to make sure that they are providing housing for all income levels.
Clearly, housing is an important problem, an issue in California. But many people's expectations, I think, are highly unrealistic. At some point, we have to decide, how many people do we want in California? Is it 40 million? Is it 50 million? Is it 100 million? I mean, pick a number. In getting to whatever amount of housing that we need, clearly we need to let the free market work more fluidly not have housing be more expensive because it takes a year or 2 years to get through the permitting process and deal with a bunch of extraneous lawsuits. So we need to think about the costs that are created and borne by all of us because of our dysfunctional regulatory system. That said, let's be honest with ourselves. If we want affordable housing, that means the price of housing is going to come down. That means the house that you own right now and that you live in. Are you prepared for that? We don't even have enough water to support all the people in this state. So we need to be very thoughtful and realistic when we look at the whole range of issues relating to the population in California.
Amanda.
Thank you. When we look at the high cost of housing in California, one of the things that we know is that it's directly attributed to the regulations and the fees mandated by Sacramento. A couple of years ago, Point Loma Nazarene University came out with a study on housing and found that more than 40% of the cost of housing was because of fees and regulations. Now, if we can claw back some of those fees and regulations, that will help a great deal because, of course, when the developer has to pay those, they're passed on to the consumer, the home buyer. But when you also look at the high cost of living in California, the taxes that we pay, the gas tax, the income tax, etc., you're also adding cost to the developer through their employees and then their subcontractors. So it really is a trickle-down effect. So what we need is somebody who's going to go to Sacramento and who's going to talk about these high taxes, the high cost of living, the regulations, and claw them back so that we can have affordable housing for everyone.
Jerome.
Thank you. High cost of housing is a real issue. Sacramento is part of the problem for sure. For example, each city, in order to have a state approved housing element, has to basically show how they can build more housing in their house. Well, not every town wants to build more housing, okay? So I call that a forced urbanization of our local communities coming out of Sacramento. They don't know what Encinitas looks like. They don't know what Vista looks like. They don't care, okay? That's a problem. It's a real issue. Do we have to have more housing in order to reduce the price? Makes sense. That's the market-driven way to do it. But what Sacramento is doing right now is not helpful, and it's not healthy for our local communities. I believe strongly that land use is a local issue.
Elizabeth.
What this really comes down to is balance and making a choice. And Mr. Krouse actually brought up that point. We have to decide what we're going to do as Californians. Right now, we can't have people living on the street or living in their cars. And I ran into those folks when I was out working at Christmas time. Families, newly homeless, working in their cars, living in their cars. We can't not build housing. I mean, we have a choice, build housing or send people out of state. What we need to do is figure out a way to get to a place that is affordable and something that everybody can live with. We have no choice but to build a little more housing, but let's do it sensibly, let's do it responsibly, let's bring all the stakeholders to the table and have a conversation about this. Walking cities are very popular in a lot of other communities. We have to take a look at the future because our kids are going to need a place to live and our grandkids are going to need a place to live. We can't just pretend that we're not advancing. We would love to have nothing but a pristine beach all and up and down the coast, but we're going to have to do something differently in the future. Thank you.
Brian.
Thank you, Kent. Well, looking at just the assembly alone would be the wrong thing. I think it's going to take a lot of collaboration and cooperation with cities, with zoning boards, to really get to the crux of the problems that we're facing right now with the housing shortage. We're all looking at all kinds of issues with city regulations, burdening developers, forcing them to really decide whether or not the costs and the benefits are in line with their business plan, with what they want to do. So I think there are many different opportunities, there are many different models, if you will, that have actually worked in California and other states. In Santa Clara, for instance, the school district was basically incentivized a developer to build a housing complex specifically for teachers. It's a very high-cost community, mostly unaffordable to anybody with a teacher salary. So there are many different options. Everything needs to be on the table for discussion, though.
Thank you, Brian. You're watching a special North County Roundtable program featuring candidates for the California 76th District Assembly seat. We're going to take a short break, return with more questions for the candidates.
For over 30 years, KOCT has been a community media resource. KOCT exists because of viewers like you who want and need to stay informed about their community. Only KOCT provides local election coverage and live airing of government meetings. Support this public service by making a tax-deductible donation today. It's easy. Go to KOCT.org, click on the donate button, make a monthly or a one-time donation. Help us help you stay informed about North County. Support your hometown television station today.
Welcome back to this special June primary edition of North County Roundtable. I'm your host, Kent Davy. Tonight we're featuring candidates for the 76th District Assembly seat. We're going to reverse the order in which we ask questions and start with Brian Wimmer. But first I want to offer an apology to Tasha Boerner Horvath. I several times referred to you as Amanda, and I apologize for that, getting order of our candidates wrong. Brian, recently the president of KOCT, San Marcos, was on our program and lamented about the inadequate funding for state universities. Do you feel our schools, and particularly higher education, are funded adequately? If not, what could you do to ensure increased funding?
Well, I think, thank you, Kent. I think that our universities and our schools are priority, and they are basically the foundation of everything that we hold near and dear with regards to research, development, getting folks into the workforce with all the skill sets and tools necessary to succeed. Now, with regards to funding, I think there's many opportunities to look at the funding to see if it is adequate enough. According to him, it's not. So I think there's definitely reasonable assumptions here that we have to look at what specifically would they like to have more funding in, and how can we tackle that? How can we advocate for those universities to get that adequate funding for those programs, for those projects that they need to do in order to make themselves viable in today's new technology world here?
Thank you. Elizabeth.
Many years ago, California made a promise to its students to provide an education through college. By and large, over the years, we've lost that. We've lost sight of that promise, and I think we need to renew that. One way that we can actually provide a college education for 2.6 million kids is to reinstate the estate tax for the top 1/5 of 1% of Californians. I don't think anybody in this room or anybody I know, these are the wealthiest Californians in the state, and they can afford it, I think. We need to invest in our kids because really, this is an investment in our future. This is not taking money from anybody. This is investing money. These are the people that are going to be running California. They're going to be the innovators. They're going to be people that are going to take care of us and the rest of the state for years to come. I can't emphasize enough how much we need to invest in our kids. There's a lot of other ways we can fund as well, but this is one of the easiest ways. Thank you.
Jerome.
Thank you, Kent. So before I would be supportive of raising fees for universities, I would need to look harder at what were you spending the money on. I know that the UC Regents just very recently raised the tuition costs pretty significantly, and that's a huge burden on people and on students, and yet we do have a lot of people that are there on scholarship too. So we need to look at how the money is being spent, where can we economize, what's really going on here, and I would definitely oppose any additional taxation. I'm very sorry, but taxing the dead seems pretty easy, I guess. But let's face it, the money in your estate, you've already paid taxes on it. I don't think it's fair to tax it again after you're dead. That's just a personal thing.
Okay. Amanda.
Thank you. My son graduated from UCLA a couple of years ago, so I know very well what it takes to put a student through the UC system in California. It's expensive, and we paid dearly for it, and it was an excellent education, and it has really set him for life with what he's going to do, and I appreciate that opportunity that he had very much. But we do offer a lot of funding for our schools, for our universities. And we have to look at where that money is going, because we do pay a lot of taxes in California, and I would not be in favor of raising any more taxes to do that. But we have to look at where the money is being spent. And there have been some questions in recent years about some of the upper echelon of the UC regents, particularly in what they're doing with the monies and the programs and the profits that they are making personally. So I think we'd have to look at, follow the money. That's the thing. Follow the money, see what they're doing with it. And if they truly are not adequately funded, which is a question, are they or are they not? Follow the money, find out if they are, and if they're not, find a way to fund them.
Ask Thomas if he'd like to respond to this question, but also briefly respond to an issue of what programs specifically attracted immigrants to this state.
Regarding the higher education funding, I mean, clearly our higher education system is critically important to the viability and strength of our economy. That said, we need to look at the entire education system, from the quality of our K through 12 programs to technical training programs and apprenticeships. What really people are looking for when they get higher education in California is to be able to be productive members of society in a reasonably paying job commensurate with their skills and their education. And there have been mismanagement, examples of terrible mismanagement. In the president's office, the chancellor's office at UC, if you remember last year, the year before, there was a slush fund that was discovered. And so they've implemented new auditing. I haven't seen the results of that yet. The other things that contribute to the dysfunction and cost of higher education is that it's frankly poorly managed. There are many examples of students that have to stay a 5th year or a 6th year just to get their courses. And that's an example of unrealistic expectations which lead to extra costs. Now, regarding immigration, I would just respond to the earlier question that a National Academy of Sciences report was issued under President Obama, I believe it was approximately September of 2016, so it was lost in the shuffle of the elections. It documented that the annual cost of illegal immigration to the United States is over $200 billion, and it costs, the costs fall more on the least who can afford it, the working poor and the unemployed. And in addition, that when illegal immigrants do pay into Medicare, Medi-Cal and Social Security, when they are later legalized, they do get credit for those payments. So it's not like that money ever goes away. When we look at that issue, we have to look at the costs and the benefits.
Thank you, Tom. Tasha.
So the question was about funding higher education. And I think that's a really good question, because when I went to UC Berkeley, and I may look a little bit younger than I actually am, but I went to UC Berkeley in 1991, it cost me $800 a semester for tuition. And that is at one of the best public universities in the entire world. And now it's 10 or 20-fold that amount, and that's not okay. One of the things that drives our economy is that we have the talent coming out of our educational institutions. So we need to, one, look at how the dollars are being spent and how can we do it more wisely. Two, where there are gaps, and I believe there are gaps, we need to be providing that funding. And three, we need to make sure kids are going to college because that's what they want to do for their profession. If there are other ways to do apprenticeships or learn as you earn programs to equally get the jobs of tomorrow, then those are the things we need to be promoting and working with our local educational institutions and businesses to make sure that we're providing those tracks as well so that everybody has access to a quality job where they can work hard and earn a fair wage.
Thank you. Brian, are you in favor of the proposed giant water project in the Sacramento Delta that would build the tunnels underneath? It's a multi-billion-dollar project.
Well, I think that's a great question, Kent. With regards to any kind of projects, we have to kind of understand what the metrics are and what the benefits are going to be for the community. Now, the cost for that particular project seems pretty overwhelming. And I've heard a lot of conjecture on many sides of the table that say that it really is not going to benefit the communities as much as it's going to cost the communities. So I think it's definitely up for an evaluation. Would I say I'd be in favor of that particular project? I'd really have to study the details and really see what is exactly involved, what kind of opportunities are there to look at alternatives. Thank you.
Elizabeth Warren, you.
I'm not a fan. I'm sorry, Governor Brown, but frankly, the two-tunnel project is problematic for a lot of people for a lot of reasons. It doesn't seem to have been thought through. And the alternative of a single tunnel would require an awful lot of new studies that would take us back to ground zero. So I think there are other things that we can do. I would like to respond to Mr. Stock's comment about taxing the dead. Okay, real quickly, just we're taxing the living when we talk about this, people who have not earned the income, and again, talking about the very top 1/5 of 1%. Thank you.
Jerome Stocks.
Thank you very much, Kent. The water project. Water projects are interesting because unlike many other projects, they tend to pay for themselves because of water rates. You get a water bill, you pay the bill, that helps pay for the infrastructure. However, San Diego County is unique in California in that we really, because of our desal project in Carlsbad that finally got built after 12 lawsuits and God knows how many years of NIMBY fighting, it finally got approved, finally got built, and now it's producing 8 to 10% of all the water needs for the state of California. Now that's really innovative and really healthy, and I would like to see that in more and more places in California. Now, if the water system fails and we don't have these tunnels, 8 to 10% of our water isn't going to do it. So I'm probably going to hold my nose and support the water project. We need a reliable supply of water.
Amanda Rigby.
Thank you. One of the things that we've all been talking about for years living in California with the droughts that we suffer is water. We need more water all throughout the state. And I've been talking about water storage and water conveyance. Now, when we talk about the water tunnels, I agree with Mr. Wimmer that there's more that needs to be looked at here to find out if this is adequate for the needs and the cost for it as well, because the cost does seem to be pretty outrageous. And I'm worried that it's going to follow the suit of the bullet train. So we need to be aware of what Sacramento is doing with the cost of these facilities. Yes, it sounds good because we need to have these facilities, but are they being built adequately, efficiently, and timely? So we need to look at that.
Thomas Krouse.
I'm absolutely against the Delta Tunnels program. It's just like putting more straws in a single glass of water. It does not increase water supply at all. If we want to increase water supply, we should incentivize public-private partnerships to build a network of water recycling facilities to create water for industrial and agricultural uses so that potable water can be set aside for human consumption. Furthermore, this Delta Tunnels project is just yet another example of completely abysmal infrastructure management and planning by the state of California. If you remember, the 2014 $7 billion water bond under Prop 1 was supposed to increase water storage. So what happened? 4 years later, we haven't increased water storage by even 1 gallon. We had torrential rainstorms last year, and not a single extra amount of it was captured. And now they're talking about having another water bond. They didn't spend the money the way they said they were just a few years ago. The state of California didn't maintain the Oroville Dam. It would have cost $25 to $50 million. It will now cost us over $800 million to repair. They can't be trusted.
Tasha, Boerner, Horvath.
Yes. Climate change will continue to cause extremely erratic weather patterns. And so water security in a state like California that is growing, we are the 6th largest economy in the world, and we have to be able to provide water for the people who live here. So infrastructure projects that provide that water security are good. The Delta tunnels in particular, they seem to have not balanced the environmental impacts with that need for water. So I think on one hand, we need to be making water conservation a way of life in California and be using smart water technology. But we also need to make sure that we find a better path that is more environmentally sensitive, that accomplishes that same goal, and that can be built efficiently by a qualified and skilled labor force.
Ryan Wimmer, would you support additional funding for the bullet train, the high-speed rail in the Central Valley, or would you move to get rid of the project?
I would certainly not necessarily be in favor of the high-speed rail project. To me, there are many alternatives and things that we need to kind of focus on. Specifically, as we're looking at autonomous vehicles in the future, where's the infrastructure for that? There really isn't any plan. So I'm looking at it from a standpoint of intelligent design. Looking at the future here, high-speed rail may be one cog in the wheel of future with transportation. But from what I've heard from many other scientists and research folks out there, is that it doesn't necessarily fit the bill with regards to transportation needs in California.
Elizabeth.
I think that that's something that maybe down the road would be appropriate, but there's an awful lot of things that we need to do first. And frankly, budgets are a matter of priorities. Right now, we need to do something about making sure that people in communities can afford to live and work in the same place. That means getting to work, in a reasonable amount of time. We need to make sure that we have adequate housing, that we have transportation that people can afford and reach out to. Folks that have to commute forever, they can't afford to buy a Tesla. So they're using a lot more gasoline. So again, the gas tax, problematic for me. It comes down to a quality of life issue. And I believe that we have lots of great opportunities for future projects, but right now we need to address things at home in our own backyard.
Jerome Stocks.
Thank you, sir. I would definitely vote not to continue funding what I like to call the crazy train to nowhere. I was in China. I was in Shanghai, China, and I actually rode on their high-speed maglev. It took us 22 miles from the middle of downtown Shanghai into the airport. And I mean into the airport. And it was amazing. It went 300 miles an hour. It was smooth as silk. It was fantastic. That is not what we're talking about building here in the Central Valley. What we're talking about building here in the Central Valley goes basically from pretty much nowhere to pretty much nowhere. It's steel wheels. It's outdated. And it's unbelievably out of control pricing and cost. I would not support that project.
Amanda Rigby.
Thank you. I think as evidenced by the fact that they have shortened the rail from, it was supposed to go from San Francisco to San Diego, and now it's to Los Angeles, and it's so incredibly over budget. It's just another example of the mismanagement and the loss of vision that we have in Sacramento. So I am not in favor of continuing with this. And I agree with several of our state legislators from both sides of the aisle, including Jim Frazier from Northern California, who has said it's time to cut our losses on this. We have other things that we need to spend that money on in California.
Tom Krouse.
Yeah, the high-speed rail needs to be shut down immediately. Every day that we continue to throw money into that boondoggle, we are wasting money that could otherwise be spent on much higher priorities like education, like water, housing, and the environment. It's just a money pit. It's a fixed point-to-point solution in probably the most dynamic period of transportation technology innovation in this country's history. It's like putting in a wired phone in a wireless world. Right? And it connects a few percent of the cities in California. And even when it's completely built out, its own projections say that it will only reduce auto emissions by 1%. Okay? There are many, many other priorities for the money.
Tasha Boerner Horvath.
Yes. I think, serving on regional boards like Sandag, we know that large infrastructure projects take time, they are complex, and they have to be slightly dynamic to evolve over that time with it being built. There's no question to me that we have to reduce greenhouse gases and fight climate change. And the high-speed rail project will help connect the innovation centers in Northern California with LA and San Diego. And that's really important. And we can't lose sight and say, we're only going to bet on autonomous vehicles. I love autonomous vehicles, and I can talk about it all day. But it's going to be one cog in the wheel that will make our transit of the future more sustainable. And I think on one last point, one thing that does concern me is the leg between San Diego and LA is one of the busiest rail corridors in our entire country, and it's been put in phase 2. So in the Assembly, I will look to make sure that our tax dollars are being used wisely, that we keep the promise to the voters who approved high-speed rails in 2008, and that we make sure that we include San Diego to LA as soon as possible in the plan.
Bran, do you think that the state is doing enough with climate change, and how do you weigh the expense of dealing with climate change and its efficacy versus the drag on the economy?
Well, the cost and the benefits with regards to climate change, the regulations and the things that are being put forth. I think the state is doing a tremendous amount with regards to climate change and regulations, but it's at the expense of a lot of important projects and a lot of things that we hold near and dear, like looking for affordable housing. So there are a lot of things that I agree with on the environmental side of the house, but then there's a lot of things that I see that just don't really make sense. And I really think that we really need to evaluate, okay, what are the costs going to be? What are the benefits? And how is this going to cater to incubating industry? or offering opportunities for people to want to live here because their company or corporation happens to be here in this state. So I think that there's a lot of questions that I have with regards to some of the initiatives that California's taken, and I would be one to evaluate that pretty strongly.
Elizabeth.
We have an awful lot of priorities to fund here in California: housing, healthcare, education for our kids, and plan for the future. That said, we need to have a future. And frankly, if we keep talking about spending money on other things and not spending it on climate change, that's like saying we need to refinish the deck of the Titanic because it needs to look pretty when we go down. To me, that's crazy thinking. We have no option. There is no planet B. We have to stop climate change. We are so far behind right now. If we had started doing something 20 years ago, we might have a shot. Now we have to reduce emissions much faster. We have to take cars off the road. We have to invest in green technology. We have no other option if we want to have a planet for our kids and grandkids. Thank you.
Jerome.
Well, as a proud Republican running for this assembly seat, I can tell you that I drive a Nissan Leaf all-electric vehicle. I'm not polluting. I have solar panels on the roof, and that charges the car. Now, I don't want to ride the bus. I am very, very concerned with the beauty and the preservation and the restoration of our coastline. And I'm very, very concerned about putting a whole bunch of extremely toxic nuclear waste 100 yards from the ocean in San Onofre. Other than that, I think I've made my point.
Thank you. Amanda.
Thank you. I agree that we all should be good stewards of our environment, and it's up to us to make sure that it is in good shape for the generations coming up behind us. But the high cost of it in California, for the regulations that we have in all of the industries, is a lot of it attributed to the mismanagement of some of these programs, and some of these goals that the state has put out are very unattainable and unreasonable, which is why the federal government announced earlier this week that they're coming in to talk to California about the unattainable greenhouse gas emissions through the vehicles. I read that in the paper this week, that they're coming in to talk to us about that. So I think that California is a beacon for climate change, for environmental standards, but I think that there are some things in some industries where they've gone too far. It's too expensive. It's part of the problem of why people can't afford to live here. And how effective is it being? It's one thing to do something that you think is great to be done because it sounds good, but is it being more effective than not doing it in certain areas?
Thomas.
With over 25 years of business experience, and even having taught finance and economics at a university in Moscow, Russia, to the last generation of communists, people born under the communist system, I can tell you one of the major flaws with our California government is that they aren't accountable to basic free market principles. They aren't accountable to a return on investment, which means they aren't accountable for a return on your taxpayer dollars. The global climate change is a global issue best suited and appropriately dealt with by nation states. The cost of global climate change should not be borne by the families of Californians. Now, that said, am I concerned? Yes, I used to drive a plug-in hybrid myself, but the range was only 27 miles, and my driving patterns were not best suited for that vehicle. Probably was not a good investment for me, but I did it anyhow. So what we need to do and keep in mind is all of the things that affect the health of Californians, like diabetes or asthma coming from other sources as well.
Thank you, Thomas.
You know, with the
Tasha.
federal administration constantly attacking California, and constantly trying to allow polluters to keep polluting, or offshore drilling, or any of these things, we have to keep California leading and make sure that we are leaders in the environment. And one of that aspects is protecting our coast. We have to make sure the coast and our lagoons and our beaches, parks and trails and open spaces are available for use because they drive our economy. When we look at transit, some people like Jerome don't want to take the bus, but lots of people would prefer to use their time wisely in a train or a bus to do something other than drive and be frustrated by hours on the I-5. So when we look at what we could do, and Encinitas has led with the region's most ambitious climate action plan, we are going to attain those goals, but it's every single decision weighing the environment and making it a priority. And in terms of what we can do on the the economic level.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Thank you, Tasha. We'll take and begin our 30-second wrap-ups with each candidate, starting with Brian Wimmer.
Thank you, Kent. I really appreciate the opportunity to share with the viewers here today who I am, what I believe, and why I know I'm the best candidate for District 76. I also want to thank all the viewers out there for taking their time out of their schedule to get to know the candidates and make an informed decision. I myself, I've been serving my country long before I decided to run for this office. I will wake up tomorrow morning and I will continue to serve. I need your vote, and it would be an honor to have your support. Thank you.
Elizabeth.
Thank you. When I got into this race, it was because I felt that there was something that I could contribute. I'm a wife, I'm a mom, I'm a journalist, I'm a social justice advocate, I've worked with a nonprofit. I've seen families struggle. I've clipped coupons myself. I understand the families in our district, and I respect our veterans, our seniors, and all of the folks who are working so hard to just have a better life. I think we all deserve it. I believe that we can do this in the Assembly, and I think that we can provide education for every child, from preschool through college, trade school, or technical training. I believe that we can give health care for every Californian. Thank you very much.
Jerome.
Thank you very much. Jerome Stocks here, candidate for the Assembly. I hope to have your support and your vote. We in California are truly blessed to be here. There's no question about that. But we also have the highest income taxes in the nation, the highest gas taxes in the nation, the lousiest traffic in the nation. I'm not sure what all we're getting as far as value goes for our tax dollars. This is nuts. So I want to go to Sacramento to fix these issues.
Amanda.
Thank you. As a two-term city councilwoman in the city of Vista and a mom who's raised 2 children here, I'm a native of California, I'm a native of San Diego, and for us to be classified with the lowest quality of life in the country is heartbreaking for me. I go around my community here in San Diego County and even up throughout the state of California, and I see some of the decisions and how they've impacted our communities negatively. With my experience and my track record, I believe I am the best candidate for this job, and I thank you for being engaged and watching the show today. Thank you.
Thomas.
Yes, thank you for tuning in and educating yourself on the candidates for the 76th Assembly. I've lived in California for 47 of my 49 years, and in that entire time, all within 2 miles of the Pacific Ocean. And I have seen the trajectory that California has gone on since before we landed on the moon. And I can tell you, California's state government is completely out of control and unaccountable, and we need to take it back for us. You can reach me at 760-659-3755 or at Thomas@Krouse for Assembly. Thank you.
Tasha.
Thank you again for tuning in today. Today we've heard about a number of issues and challenges and opportunities that we as Californians and members of the 76th Assembly District, Encinitas, Carlsbad, Oceanside, and Vista, and Camp Pendleton, have to address in this next election. And I hope you will have heard that the reasonable, the rational, the balanced approach that I will take in the State Assembly, and I have the temperament, track record, and experience to keep California leading and getting good things done. My name is Tasha Boerner Horvath, and I'd be honored to have your vote.
This brings us to this program to a close. I want to thank you all for all the candidates for the 76th Assembly District for being here, your willingness to serve. Please note all the candidates were invited. However, the 76 candidates, Phil Graham and Maureen Muir, declined the invitation. Thank you for watching this special edition of North County Roundtable. KOCT will also be playing programs featuring the candidates for the San Diego County Supervisor's 5th District race and candidates for the 49th congressional seat. All these June primary election programs will be shown right up to the June election on Cox Cable in Oceanside, AT&T U-verse, countywide, and on video on demand on our new website, koct.org. Be informed about your community by watching North County Roundtable. Thanks. We'll see you next time.
KOCT program underwriters are not affiliated with the City of Oceanside. This program is underwritten in part by Waste Management of North County in Oceanside. We are dedicated to serving customers and community as a safe, comprehensive service provider, a good corporate citizen, and a responsible environmental steward. Think green. Think Waste Management.